This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome. This is Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole, and I'm here with my super secret, non-secret co-host, Jason Caldwell and Zach Louis. Today's show, well, before we talk about today's show, of course, our shows are always sponsored by the Wujigen Clinic in Toronto, Ohio, land of far less COVID cases than we have right now in the States. Wujigen offers a full spectrum of health and acupuncture, divination, and spiritual services. We'll leave it at that. Today's show is going to be about divination, and it's probably going to be a controversial show. The second hour of the show, we're going to actually play a game that was in hands-on chaos magic, but we're going to show you some additional factors that make your divinations actually better in practice for the sponsors of the show. So first, we're going to talk about divinations and timing of magic, which to me actually is even more important nowadays than it was before with COVID, since timing right now is, some things are just not possible and some things have a very small window to be possible. And some things you shouldn't ask for right now. And you have to figure out which is which. And with that, I open the floor to everyone to jump on in.
Yeah, so I think the first thing should be, let's get kicking off with what should you be asking for?
Well, right now, prosperity magic is going to be hard. We don't need divinations for that one, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's generally very difficult with external constraints there. So this is
possible, though. This is where divinations come in, right? I mean, like, when we talk about divinations, like, obviously, we're using a couple different ones. We're talking about binary divination systems, pictorial ones, automatic drawing. We're sort of leaving out the formulaic ones for the discussion today to define our constraints of astrology. We're just leaving them out for a lot of reasons. That's how it is. So we're talking about some sort of active divination process that you're actually trying to divine something. Maybe we should even take a step back and say, well, what is that? What does a divination give you as opposed to what to ask for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what does it give you? At least in my take, it gives you information of what could be happening or what is currently happening. Jason, you got any takes on that?
Well, I brought the whole idea when we were talking earlier about this being like checking the weather or checking the forecast of how things are going to go. If you're planning, come on, I like to plan things somewhat in advance, as far as setting some goals a month out, 2 months out to 6 months out. And divination does help tell you whether or not certain ideas you're setting into play are worthwhile.
Well, I think it gives you a snapshot of probabilities.
Yeah.
The problem with probabilities and divinations is people don't understand probabilities. Probabilistic thinking is actually tough for people to think about in statistics. Like, people do not get probabilities. Like, you get a divination, what do people think? Like, you read the divination as fact, but really it's probabilities. And at that point, it's the most likely probabilities. But even then, we'll get to some, I feel like the biggest problem with divinations, particularly tarot and maybe throwing the bones, and some others that are more interpretive, is that you will apply a perception to that doesn't actually reflect the probabilities, and it actually can influence the divination system itself. But probabilities could mean that this outcome right now is 51% more likely. It's a snapshot of what's likely, not necessarily what's going to happen. Like, there could be another possibility that's 49%. And then you do something the next day, which is counterproductive, and that goes to 70% is the outcome for that. But when you did the divination, at that point in time, it wasn't the least likely set of options. Sort of like a snapshot, like what you're saying about the weather. But these probabilities, weather always gives you probabilities of rainfall, not facts about rainfall. It's like a predictive.
Yes, but just because it's not absolute does not mean it's still not useful.
Right, and what those probabilities are reflecting is partially you. So it's giving you a mechanism to talk to yourself in its ideal state. And it's giving you a reflection of possibly how you are interacting in the world at that point in time. Now, that doesn't mean that it's set in stone, like I said, but it's a reflection of those probabilities right then and there. One of the issues with most divinations, although honestly some of the binary systems are more resilient, but not totally resilient against this. I think the reason they're a little bit more resilient is people don't understand mathematics as well. So binary systems tend to be very mathematical, harder for people to grasp how to influence it intuitively because it's mathematical. Stuff like the I-Ching is very, you throw, and it's, unless you really know the I-Ching, it's like, well, here's left, here's line, broken line, line. It's like, okay, well, that's tough to
totally tough. I mean,
to kind of conceptualize that. Whereas when you're dealing with the tarot, you're like, wealth, 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 Six of Cups, or not Six of Cups, you know,
well,
10 of Stones, because you know it's the wealth card, right? You kind of can influence the outcome.
well, even that, it's kind of like what? Remember, I started when I was learning with you back in the day. I'm still learning with you. However, I did I-Ching. I was doing the 3 coin toss. That shit annoyed me. I mean, that was like, I remember having those books and having to write that stuff out. It was extremely annoying. So when you're like, here's the tarot deck, I'm like, oh yeah, this is an easy switch.
Yeah, but the tarot itself is more influenceable. Like the responsibility at that point is mainly on you not to let yourself get in the way of the cards or the divination set. That's actually hard. Like, to not influence the outcomes. Everyone, when you're reading something on, like, you're trying to figure out what to do, you have an outcome you'd like to have happen in most cases. Very seldom is anyone very detached, so detached from the outcome that they're like, I don't care. You know, whether it's playing cards, whether it's tarot, whether it's any number of things, you care. And being able to project that into the divination actually changes this probabilities of the divination, because what the divination is actually looking at is the probabilities of the energies around right then and there. Which,
so let me bring this up, because I think a lot of people have there's this legend of you should never read for yourself because of your personal bias and how much you have invested in the desire for result. I don't think any of us really agree with that, but what's your hot take on that?
I think it's partially, I would give it a scopes or whatever, partially true.
Yeah, I mean,
but I question who said it, right? Was it a commonly used phrase from somebody who's trying to make a business selling tarot divinations? Again, they have a vested interest for saying that. I would say it takes an extraordinarily, there's a missing step that we always talk about every single week, and it's all this fundamental stuff that nobody ever wants to talk about that has to be there first for you to do a reading on yourself.
Okay, so what is that fundamental step, sir?
You know, meditation, trance, focus, being able to block out all the stuff to focus on one thing. You know, all the stuff in Hands-On Chaos Magic, every single occult book ever, the whole first half of every single occult book ever. Except for weird ceremonial magician grimoires from the 14th century, which have different stuff.
Because 14th century.
Yeah, well, you know, it's just a theme for today. Actually, some of those books are probably older than the 14th century. Just a good, sexy number to talk about the 14th century, I guess.
So, I mean, you know, we kind of delved into like biases that you can project into the divination. Now, are some divination systems more biased? We've talked about tarot, but compare that to I-Ching. Is it as easy you find in your experience? I know in my experience, when you're casting a lot, if you're doing it the old school way, it's much more difficult because you literally have 64 sticks. I mean, unless you're really projecting into those sticks.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, in the second part of the show, we're going to show simplified OB system, which is divinations. I think it's harder because people don't understand probabilities. I think for me, it wouldn't matter. Because I'm a data scientist, I wouldn't have the issue of probabilistic thinking. Like, I would just be like, yeah, I want to make this number be more this way, and I could still influence it that way. There are other systems such as Ori, which is a Roomba based, Ifa, basically, not Ori we're going to show, like, but that we're going to show Obi, but Ifa is basically one that uses spiritual rituals to kind of block out people to get a direct conduit from the spirit of divination itself. There's some divination systems that often use that technique to try to remove the person from the equation to get better, the bad side of that is you have to then pay a priest of those spirits to actually get the reading, and they influence the result, in my humble opinion, depending on whether they're honest and good character or not. You guys are going to agree. You got to speak. Remember, Zoom switches the screen of who's speaking.
Oh, yeah.
Nodding, but no one can see it.
Right, and I'm thinking about this. So what you're pointing to is that there's certain practitioners that rather than just giving you a reading, they would actually do some form of magic to influence the result to make their reading accurate.
Why wouldn't you do that if that's your whole business model? I mean, the only reason you don't do that if that's your business model is you're honest and you value good character. If you don't care and good character is lip service, why wouldn't you throw curses into divination itself? Why would you have somebody there for an hour reading to get them to buy more stuff, get them to be hooked in, get them to actually buy cleans?
Well, you know, even though you called me the N-word earlier, that's just never been in my Nazi, not the other N-word.
Say that, man. What the hell?
Nazi's still pretty bad, dude. Anyway.
I call you a Nazi. When did I call you a Nazi?
You called me a secret Nazi when you introduced me. Anyway.
What the fuck?
Did it back in the intro?
I don't think he did, man. I think you're hearing shit.
What drugs are you on today? Jeez. I didn't call you a Nazi. I said my secret co-host.
Yeah.
Co-host, what the hell, dude?
And I heard the Nazi word come through my headphones. I freaked out a little. Anyway.
Dude, no. Tiki Torque Nazi. No.
Maybe I have taken some bad drugs. Maybe that energy drink was laced with something earlier. But anyway. So no, I have not thought about doing such things because honestly, if I was going to have to do all that magic to influence a reading, my readings would be $300 or more each. But go on.
Well, I generally charge $150.
Yeah.
For that reason, because I actually do use the spirits to remove the person asking for the reading, to get myself in the proper state of trance, to purify everything, to kind of remove any influences I might bring to the table. Just like, I mean, I hate to say it, like wearing masks removes your influence of COVID to other people. I know it's a controversial topic, but it's very similar. Basically, you're using all this stuff to basically look at the situation and remove as many impurities as possible to kind of get it to the point that you're getting a clean, clear understanding of the situation. Sometimes using spirits help with that, and I generally do that. That's why I generally do charge $150 per hour. But I have a professional career, and I don't have to scam people. I don't have to tell them what they want to hear to make money, and I don't have to curse them in the reading to get them further dragged into more readings or more work. You know, if people need work, I tell them this is what you need. If people need to stop being stupid, I say you need to make some lifestyle changes, you know, because you're bringing this on yourself. And I don't have to scam people because I have a career. You know, I have 2 master's degrees. So it's just that way it is. But if you're doing it for clients, Zach's done it for clients, you almost have to do this.
In what context? The remove your influence?
Well, but yeah, like the cleansing stuff, because you're
Absolutely.
yeah, because you have to remove their surface negativity. You have to remove your surface negativity. If you had a stressful day, anything like that, you have to like get into the proper trance state, and then you have to actually go read somebody you don't know anything about and make sure you understand what is actually being said to you about this. And then you have to translate it into a means to say things in a way that the other person actually understands what you're trying to get across.
Right. I mean, I'll even take examples where it's like, okay, I'll do like what they call like 4 pillars readings. And that's basically like, it's all calculated ahead of time. You don't get anything with that. And they just like, okay, these are your elements. I have to do the interpretation on that. There's nothing about me coming into that, but the interpretation still can be influenced. So I do those cleansings ahead of time so I can actually get the proper info.
And here's both saying, you know, we're doing cleansings all the time, spiritual cleansings, banishings, before we even step to do a reading. I mean, for yourself, it's probably doubly important. You need to take a spiritual bath, or even do more banishings, or go do it after you do Qigong for an hour, or like go meditate, you know, for a while.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets into like that's definitely not talked about. Usually, people's like, "Here's a deck," and if they're using tarot, it's like just flip the cards. But if you're pissed off, you're gonna get pissed off cards.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's just a snapshot of the current probabilities as you're right then and there. I mean, this is the thing. Like, I really feel like this is one of the. Well, first you'll see people will get on the internet and say stuff like, "Oh, well, I could just go do a reading right in 5 seconds," and I've been doing this for this many years. You either have a talent or not. That's a lie. It's practice, and getting into a trance state that fast is practice. I've seen some of the best like card readers, conjure people in Chicago. They'll throw those cards fast. You can watch them get in trance in like 30 seconds because they're so practiced at it. They call it the Holy Spirit, but they're still going deep, 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 fast, you know, which, you know, you can use NLP for, you know, and self-hypnosis if you're really good at it, to get deep, deep, deep fast, but you're still getting there. And you may not actually understand what the reading is. The reading's saying, even after you're saying it. That's the other thing about reading for other people. You know, it's really hard if you're going deep. You don't always consciously fully know what the hell you just read on. They can't see you guys because we're on Zoom.
That's very true in my experience. It's kind of like, okay, if people are like, hey, I'll say stuff in real time, even when I'm doing like Qigong classes or even when I do treatments. I mean, that's kind of like intuitive divinations there. I'll say stuff and people are like, okay, and I'm not going to remember it afterward. So I usually tell people, I'm like, if I say some like intuitive shit, you got to remember that for yourself because I'm not going to.
Which gets to Jason's point initially, like, how do you do a reading for yourself? If that's happening, right, and you got to go deep to get the correct answer. Well, we have technology, right? You literally could write it down, or you could record the reading and what you're saying and then review it when you're not that deep into trance state. that alone would improve most people's readings. But most people don't go that deep in the trance state. They don't try to go so far in the trance state that they lose track of who they're doing the reading for. And that's literally what you almost have to do for yourself, or you have to just live in a super magical reality where you're just like, shit is weird, and you've trained yourself to believe shit is weird. So because shit is weird, it doesn't affect you as much because you're just doing the divination. And you can kind of practice.
Right. I mean, another, I guess I wouldn't call it a hack, but it's something I've experienced. It's kind of like, okay, I find certain spirits come around when I do certain reads, and that's the way I can kind of actually get it when I come back out. I'll feel the vibe with the room. I'll be like, oh, you guys are here.
I also have to you also have to watch that too, because certain spirits do come around with certain readings, and you have to make sure they're not influencing the reading so you get an accurate reading, because you literally that's why you have to clear the space and hold it. While I personally may or may not work with such things as demons, I certainly have to make sure a demon isn't influencing a reading. Or I may or may not have a relationship with the Archangel Michael, but that may or may not be appropriate for what I'm reading on right then and there. And they will have their own biases because their energy has a bias that will then present the situation in a certain light. Like as if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
And then on the flip side, sometimes when I'm hanging out and talking to a demon, intentionally,
May or may not talk to a demon, right?
I have no qualms about saying may or may not. Sometimes when I'm talking to a demon, and I'm using divination as a way, and I do this with other spirits too, it's not just demons, but, use the cards or the divination tool as a way to verify what's going on in said ritual and said conversation with said entity. But there's something about doing it in ritual space where you could be more lucid of mind, but because, as you put it, you've set an intention, you have a spirit there, you've set the space and you've sealed the space for said activity, it doesn't take so much of being out of it to get a more accurate answer.
I don't know about that one. I think that's partially true, but it depends on the spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every time that I've been totally accurate in some of these readings with spirits, I have been out of the building.
Yes, and that's a whole different ballgame.
But then the predictive elements of some of these readings are a year out. Of course, this particular set few readings this last year have been frightening when I look back at the readings and what you guys told me was told to be in this reading, and then what's going on with COVID. I'm actually pretty terrified.
For those of you at home, without going into too much detail, I'm just going to say that we got together at the beginning of the year, and Andrea did a hell of a predictive reading for this year that's coming down pretty much. The events are coming down to the month, and we didn't know all the specifics, but it was pretty damn dead on.
Well, I even tried to work against that reading and couldn't.
Yeah. I mean, I know I was working on stuff too, and it was like, no.
Yeah, about that. Which brings us to a huge problem with divinational readings, right? We're talking about probabilistic snapshots, but now we're actually giving the counter case that sometimes it actually does, in fact, give you predictive elements. But what it doesn't give you is the right interpretation of those predictive elements. I don't think there's a way I could have There's two readings that I've done that I really felt like, in retrospect, they made complete sense. Actually, three. There was a third one too, but the third one was a little bit time ago because it was 9/11. But I had no context for what was being described from the spiritual world whatsoever. Like, there was no way for me to put it into context. I've personally never lived in a pandemic, so I had no context of what a disease pandemic looks like. So I think, what did we describe the reading? When I look back and listen to recordings, it's like something like chaos, social.
It was like social unrest or something like that.
Social unrest. Holy shit! Did I say that? Oh yeah, that's right. That was in there. Yeah. Well, okay. easy to understand.
A need to have supplies, basic supplies at home.
At home.
Right. So I had no context for understanding what the meaning of that was, right? That's important, actually. There's a whole bunch of missing pieces to the divination that we can't put together a story. We don't really understand it. Like 9/11, you know, was similar. Like, I'm like, well, something's happening. But it's like I could see something like, in that case, I really felt like it was towers falling, but I didn't understand the context. I had no way to understand what that meant. I just thought it was metaphorical, like bad, right? It's like financial readings. Like if you don't understand what you're looking at, it's hard to see that. Like several people here know that I'll say like pretty well with readings predicted that the financial collapse was going to happen, but they didn't have a context for what it meant. Right? So this gets to a big problem with divinations. Is like you might get some sort of gleam of information, but you don't have the picture. It's like the elephant with the three blind men. So you have an elephant, but you don't know what you're looking at because you don't have a context for that. You are trying to piece together, mentally piece together a context. And there would be people out there who say, well, I'm such a good medium or I'm such a good diviner that I just get the whole context. Bullshit. Bullshit. That's the sales pitch. They do not.
Right. And I think this is really important. Like the context conversation, it's like, okay, I know in my experience, I've done business readings. I have some business background, but there's certain things I'm going to be missing because I don't have certain elements of what that means. So when people are saying, oh, here's some information, I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense. Now I can do a suggestion. But without that context or that missing information, because I don't know it, I can't really give them much other than that general area that's blurry.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about divinations. It's giving you a snapshot of energies. You still have to have a discussion around the context of what to flesh out what the actual where to hang the energy on. Like, okay, so you're doing divination. Like, now this isn't always true. Sometimes you'll directly get information that is just radically different information, and it's specific. But usually that's when you're going a lot deeper, you know, and the spirits are speaking through you. But usually that is a little different, but usually you're looking at snapshots of probability. You don't actually, when you listen to somebody, you can actually hear it, you know, or if you're really stepping back and observing the result, but not getting engaged, not necessarily attaching to the result of the reading so much, you can do divinations on yourself in a similar way because you're like, this probably is this and this and this, which by the way, Jason, that further goes into the issue of self-divinations, why I said partially true. Because how many people can actually detach from the outcome of the reading?
Yeah, right.
But it's like any other magical thing at that point. Like, it's going your way in a reading, what's the natural impulse? Or it's going against you, what's the natural impulse?
Natural impulse is going to be to try to not see that. You're going to want to sway it the other way, right?
Exactly. Right? If you're trying to get an actual snapshot to use it as information, you have to take the good with the bad. You literally have to be, I mean, we probably will do a whole show on Buddhism someday and get the hate mail from that show, but you literally have to basically have no attachment to the reading whatsoever. You're literally looking at it, and when you have an emotional reaction, which is basic, it's really basic Zen Buddhism techniques. You have an emotional reaction, you're like, that's very interesting. I'm having an emotional reaction to my own reading. But you still have to stay detached enough to keep going through it, right? To ask appropriate questions. We're doing a reading, for instance, if the Tower shows up, which is a very bad card, and not bad, but it's not always bad. Usually it signifies fast, radical change of an aggressive nature, as if something like a whole building is falling, kind of everything changes right then and there. If that shows up in a reading, most people's or the death card, which actually could be a good card in a reading, depending. But if that shows up, people's natural reaction throws the rest of the reading off because they're out of the trance state, they're out of this hyper focus, they're out of the mental zone for this to actually work. This goes back to some of the other shows we're talking about where they've already kind of went into judgment thinking as opposed to listening. And once you're in judgment thinking, the reading's over. You can't ask other questions and get answers because you might not like the answers and they might be honest. Like, so if you're asking, well, how do I avoid this? You could very well get the answer of, there is no way to avoid this. And then it's like, well, how do I mitigate the damage of this? Then there might be some answers. But you have to get past that first shock and awe of terror of bad things coming in my life and my life's changing, to then go into the, okay, well, what can I do about it?
Yeah, I mean, in this way, now we're starting to get into this whole thing of like observer self and even like what divinations can be used for. I mean, I know you mentioned it in Hands on Chaos Magic also, where it's like where you could be possibly using this stuff for enchantments, but it's an easy way if you understand the energy later.
We're going to have a whole show on that, I promise. Shows on that. One with the Monkey King and one probably on Darrow.
I want to play with the Monkey King. I missed that one.
Well, go listen to the show. I mean, we literally invoked the Monkey King in the second hour, dude. More like invoked ourselves into the Monkey King space.
Yes.
That was more like what we did. Monkey King's awesome. He's a super rebellious spirit that's like Robin Hood. Which is kind of funny because although we're talking about divinations, that's about Qigong, but that's not about Qigong because the I-Ching and Qigong actually have lots actually to say to each other, depending on how you interpret things and how you interpret the body.
Well, right. And how, I mean, that gets into a whole different conversation, which we'll leave to our Qigong book. But the transitional states and being able to read the state at that moment, I mean, it goes back to these pieces of, well, what's actually happening, right? So, I mean, we've talked about these more, I guess we'd say, objective type of divinations. I mean, we also have the other ones where are much more intuitive based. It's a lot harder to structure, like maybe possibly like pyromancy or even like the dream interpretations of things, right?
Or water interpretation or water scrying. Scrying in general is more difficult because it's basically interpretive. That doesn't mean it's less accurate. I mean, this goes back into the same thing. Like, I'm telling you, unless we do the Yarrow stocks, because I'm a data scientist, I can fuck with the I-Ching.
Oh, absolutely. Like, even the coins, I found I could fuck with it. Now,
these outcomes, it's just a math problem. If you're good at probabilistic thinking, you can mess with probabilistic systems of binary systems. It's just that simple. Like since I've been doing statistics more and more and more, I can feel that when I do the I-Ching, I can mess with it. Like, and I have been able to mess with it because it's probabilistic, not image-based. Most people are visual thinkers, so it's easier to mess with a visual system of divination than a probabilistic one. But that's simply based on their experience. It's not based on the underlying. I used to believe it was because binary systems were just better, possibly. But now, since I've been doing statistics more, I'm like, no, it's because the underlying experience of the person's different. That leads it resistance, because people have resistance to math.
Right. So then how does this work in terms of, I know a lot of Eastern stuff is generally more math-based divinations, and they're applying it more and more to technology. So, I mean,
well,
give it a or two, or is it like that?
So very math-based. And there's also geometric systems and ceremonial, well, those might be African-based, naturally. Just grafted into Hermeticism. You got to say something, Jason. You can't just nod your head.
So, guys, I'm gonna bring this topic up because I think it's interesting. Okay, so we've been talking about divinatory systems you do on purpose, and before the show in our private conversation, you guys had brought up the whole concept of using deja vu, which makes me curious because I've had deja vu happen. I haven't found a practical use for it because to me it's like a glitch in the matrix. Hey, it's cool, it's weird, but I've never found a practical purpose for it.
But isn't that the practical use for it? It's literally a glitch in the matrix.
Okay, so what information have I ever? I've never personally gleaned information from deja vu that I found useful in predicting and or changing anything.
Well, I haven't found a use for predictive analysis, but I haven't had use for current analysis, as in if there's deja vu, there's lots of things that could be going on. I mean, but usually it means magic. I literally associate it with some sort of magical hiccup. Not hiccup, but possibly influence, like time magic or other magics causing a hiccup in actual system. Like, you know, like omens are much more clear cut. But I consider deja vu one type of omen. That it's kind of like, why am I here again? Now, where and when that occurred is also important, because we go back to deja vu. Sometimes the pattern is similar enough to another pattern, so it's just a psychological effect that you're like, But sometimes where you experience that deja vu the first time was not in this reality, it was a dream state. And in which case you come to the realization that this is a deja vu moment because you literally saw the moment previously and didn't understand it in a dream state. And that, you know, if you're paying attention to the deja vu, could be predictive if you have good dream journals. And you're like, well, this was the general interpretation of that dream. It never came to pass. However, then you have the deja vu moment. You're like, but wait a minute, that exact moment was in this dream, you know, and what was the rest of the dream? Is this the moment that that dream connected to? Because dreams are notoriously hard to predict when they're actually talking about. Like, actually, calibration actually is something we've been skipping around as far as the topic, but it's probably one we should get to, because this dream stuff and actually divinations in general, one of the key components that I think kind of separates out a good diviner, besides somebody just trying to make money, obviously, like we talked about, versus somebody just throwing cards, is calibration.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, calibration in terms of, I mean, we have a whole sponsor show coming up for that right after this, so if people are interested, you totally sign up for that. That teachable. However, it's like, what could you do for a calibration piece there? I mean, one, we've already talked about, like the cleansing is a big one, I find. The trance state's another one we've talked about consistently.
Well, we've been talking around calibration, right? We're like, we get these amorphous things, and we have to have a conversation with someone to get more information. Why? It's calibration. You're looking for calibration details in the conversation to kind of understand what the energies mean, so you can actually put that into actual details. Most times you're going to get it, even if you're very good at mediumship and divination, which those are separate skills, but not entirely as separate as people make them seem on the internet. Literally, we've had people on Deeper Down before who are like, oh, these are totally different skills. Yeah, maybe not. They're just different forms of listening, actually. But in a way, like, we've been dancing around this calibration all the time. Like, if you are doing a reading for somebody who gives you no details whatsoever, and they're like, tell me my future, it's going to sound like a fortune teller future. I feel like I don't do divinations like that. My divinations are coaching sessions, because literally, let's get to some real details, so that we can get some real solutions and look at the problems and the current situation from from as much perspective as we can.
That's going to make some people angry, but I totally agree. The more information, it's better to have that conversation about what's going on in your life and read on what to do about those circumstances than to just play fortune teller.
Well, I don't necessarily. I mean, that's what people want, a lot of it, because they want a spiritual experience. But really what they're asking for a spiritual experience is a spiritual wonderland. I mean, it's great that people want to believe in magic, but then they poo-poo the existence of it. So, I mean, whatever, but the fact is, like, yeah, it's going to make some people angry because it directly goes counter to the spiritual escapism narrative that's so much part of a cult culture right now. I after COVID, I was convinced 5 years ago that spiritual escapism was not going to be an option. Now, in COVID reality, when, whether or not you can pay rent or not depends a lot on whether or not you can accurately predict details. I'm pretty much 100% like, yeah, you don't have time or energy for spiritual escapism.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, those detail pieces, I mean, I tell people straight up when they come to me, I'm like, you gotta have goals or I'm not even going to bother doing a reading for you.
I'm not quite so bad as that. If people don't have goals, I will be like, our first conversation is to kind of work through what is your goals. I'm not throwing cards in that part of the talk. I'm literally doing coaching. Like, what makes you happy? Let's figure that out first. Or even better than what makes you happy, what will give you meaning, and how do we then structure the rest of this conversation around that so we can work towards those things and try to uncover that. But that's straight coaching, right? I really do not feel that coaching and divination can be separated in a practical sense. Like, I mean, I know people do it, and I've paid for readings that do it. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't go very well. The information is not accurate. And in fact, like, I've had people do divinations for me that did not take a coaching approach or did not consider the fact that I was a magician and the readings were wrong, right? How you interpret that based on somebody who can literally change fate, because that's what magicians do. They literally work to change the situation, is different than the answer that you get from a reading for somebody who's accepting it as absolute truth.
Well, now this gets into hate mail topics, but that's where it also gets into, like, I've heard this argument with this, right?
I mean, Zach, the whole show is a hate mail topic, right? But go ahead, right? You want
it's like, when people are like, oh, it's meant to be Mercury retrograde, and I'm like, well, if you're a magician, you can change that shit.
Oh, okay, we're going to leave that one alone. That is hate mail.
You've got Mercury in your retrograde. What? Or your Gatorade. Anyway.
Oh, my God. Oh. Silence. That's the only response to that, Jason, is silence. Got Mercury in your Gatorade. What? Oh, jeez.
Hashtag trending. New Twitter.
I mean, this point, though, that you raise about divinations with spirits is one that we use often in ritual, and we use that. But I want to kind of paraphrase that. We understand when we're doing that with certain spirits of any sort that we are getting we're getting a biased perspective, which is okay. It's not bad to say that you're getting a biased perspective in a divination, by the way. Either we're getting a biased perspective from the point of view of one spirit, if we did the evocation or invocational work correctly, and we understand that bias is a certain perspective, which is an important point that we're getting to, perspective. It isn't necessarily bad that we're saying it's biased, because there's no reading that is unbiased whatsoever, ever, no matter what. There's going to be a bias. It's just whether it's a useful bias or not. It's useful perspective or not. And so often we'll use that technique that Jason raised to get a different perspective from an energy locus or energy information locus that is very different from our day-to-day state, you know? Now, he would own up to his work with certain demonic entities, but whatever, right? Some of those entities actually gave him divinations in one case that were counter to what he wanted too, and were actually productive. But that's from the perspective. It's first to understand that you actually are understanding mediumship right is often how we're using this, like to see if the physical cards or the I-Ching or Obi actually matches what you're hearing, because hearing spirits or clairvoyance is particularly prone to wishful thinking. Really prone to wishful thinking. Like, now granted, with both tarot and I-Ching and scrying particularly, there is a way to get better. You know, now that we're like 850, like we've been ranting, you know, the simple way to get better at them is to keep a spreadsheet. Predicted result, actual result, a stocking of what you did during the ritual, like blessings, what did you do for blessings to open the ceremony? What did you do for closings? You know, where were you, if it was wrong, where were you wrong? Were you wrong in substantial details or like interpretive details, right? Was the divination totally wrong, or were you wrong on detail, on the interpretation? Which, if you're wrong on the interpretation, that tells you got too much in the way, or you didn't do enough conversation, or you were or parts of yourself were interfering with the interpretation. I mean, I think that's a good solid foundation, actually. If people followed that for divinations, they would get better.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is also a piece that we haven't really talked about, though it doesn't make too big a difference, but it's also, look at the divination tool itself. It's like, that's going to have interpretative points. Like, we could talk about Toth deck versus another tarot deck, like Rider. They're going to be slightly different.
The Tock deck's such an asshole.
Right.
It's a complete asshole. I mean, that's good in a way, but there's other tarot decks that are wholly different. I mean, Jason's tarot deck, I forgot the name of it. Jason, what's the name of that deck?
Yeah. People are going to be like, he uses what? It's the Gilded Tarot. And it's like so much like colorful and nicer than what you think my tarot deck would be.
So happy every time I read the deck. It's like the outcomes are like, it's fantastic. Bam. Like, where the Tock deck's like, you're asking stupid questions. Go back and ask better questions, you idiot. That's like the Tock deck's interpretation. Like, well, I love that, because that actually is like, okay, I'm a freaking idiot. Okay, I can accept that as an answer once I'm detached. That lets me get better divinations. But yeah, even then, the quality of the coins in I-Ching can make a big difference too, I found. You know, you start throwing brass coins or gold coins, you get different readings.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you totally get different readings. I had one deck, this fairy deck, it would give accurate answers, but it was so cheerful about the outcomes. Then I'm like, okay, that doesn't really, okay, sure, that's going to be the outcome. You know, it's like, you know, but yeah, it's usually pretty positive, actually. Like,
well, yeah, it's like the same thing when I do the I-Ching stuff. It's like, you know, a Taoist interpretation of the I-Ching is totally different than the Buddhist or Confucian. The Confucian one's like very proper. Taoist one's like, you're being stupid.
The Taoist one is like, you're being stupid a lot of times. Like, stop being stupid or go better. That's often like the answers in divinations. Like, it's like, yeah, hey, stop being stupid, things will go better. Oh, okay, thanks. But I mean, that's the thing. The medium itself of the divination system makes a radical difference. It's a perspective. The medium itself provides a bias, which is okay. Because like we were saying, there's no such thing as an unbiased reading. That's the first thing. Once you lose the idea, you can get to 0% bias. It's easy to start going, okay, this is biased, but I know how it biases things, so I can kind of piece that together because I understand the bias. I mean, if you ever throw stuff like the bones, that gets even more biased. Or necromantic divinations, like throwing the bones, it's very biased, right? The energy is very biased too, but it doesn't mean it's not accurate.
Yeah. So, and I think this is also, it's like, when you're looking at the type of divination, I mean, it's a reflection of yourself. So it also brings awareness, like, what type of work are you doing? I find when I'm doing certain types of work, my readings are completely happy. I'm like, what the hell? I need this to be neutral. So I bring myself back to being neutral, even though it leads to a more positive read.
Well, actually, usually you just give me a call at that point and say, my readings are totally happy. I know that's garbage. What's really going on?
Exactly.
And I'll be like, well, buy me a beer. I'll go talk to you about it, I guess. Not anymore, because COVID beer.
But there is Amazon delivery.
Yeah.
I want some of that helium beer. It's fake.
Is it fake?
Fake. There's no way to infuse helium into beer. It's fake.
Silence again. 1,000 puppies just died, Jason. 1,000 puppies just died.
Dude, if that was real, if that was chemically possible, you done know I would have had it already.
With the squeaky voice and all. But I had like a chipmunk radio show.
That would be the best, actually. To hear Jason have a chipmunk voice through the whole radio show, I will pay for that.
Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue? A helium beer in this hand, a handful of mushrooms in this hand. Oh, it'd be fun.
Dude, well, first, you'd have to do the mushrooms about 34 minutes to 60 minutes before the show. Otherwise, it would just not do anything for the show. But it would be fun. That's for sure.
Shiitake, of course.
Yeah, that's what we meant. Sure. We're not on Parax. You could say that stuff now. The government might be listening to us, so who knows?
Yep, who knows?
I think the government got bigger fish to fry than us, but who knows?
Maybe. This is the last thing I want to talk about before we do a pitch for our second hour is the environmental situation has a direct effect on the ratings, more than you'd think. Right now, what do you think the readings are going to say? Right? You have to actually be able to separate out your situation from the environmental situation. No matter what, whether you're a mask believer or not, by the way, I'm a mask believer, so if you don't believe that, you can go send me hate mail, whatever. It doesn't matter. The situation's still chaotic, and at least 10 to 15% of people don't have jobs, which is similar to the Great Depression. Clearly, that's going to create a lot of anxiety that you have to either adopt or kind of push aside in the reading, through the divinations, through the banishing, possibly through having spirits help you push that aside so you can kind of see a pathway through it. Otherwise, a lot of divinations are going to come out much worse than they should for an individual person. You guys want to speak to that? That's been my occurrence right now.
Oh, that's totally been my occurrence, and I've totally had to do shielding to block that off or have the spirits help me with that. Because it was especially rough when we were in the middle of that pandemic piece, much earlier. It was pretty bad where I'd be like, I know this is the environment. It's not me, nor is it accurate of anything that I'm asking for right now.
I have found that because the divinations are affected by the general environment, I've learned to use that more strategically by, okay, certain things that I want to do are going to be affected by this environment, and I do need to take that into consideration. It's not just about, it's about looking for the points of least resistance. So I think situationally it's made me a better diviner than I used to be.
Why? Because you were just ignoring the situation and things. It's too up in your face now to ignore it. But I agree with everything you said. Like I would say, like, I'm not just pushing it aside. I'm trying to push aside the effect and kind of look for those pathways that are still open even in the things. But was it a better diviner because it's in your face at this point?
Yes, because I'm a bull in a china shop, and normally when the world is calm, I can bully my way into what I want, usually. And I think what I have found that lately I have to use a lot more finesse.
Oh my God, it's a miracle.
Yep.
Praise the spirits. Jason has used finesse. Nothing, Jason? Just silence. Jeez.
What? I agree. What do you want? Do you want an argument? Maybe I am calmer. Maybe you're right. I've gotten calm.
We said AJ makes you calm. We're convinced.
CJ. CJ. The dog's named CJ because she is named after Carl Jung.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, and guess who came when I said that?
Photobomb. Dog photobomb. Nice. It's 8:59. We actually started about 5 minutes late. You guys have any parting words for people actually doing divinations right now? So in the second part of the show, before we go to parting words, we're going to use the game and hands-on chaos magic, which is the book I wrote. I should have written like 5 books by now. However, life, graduate school, stuff like that. But we're going to use a game. The whole second part of the show is going to be a game. I'm going to show you guys how to do Obi as well. But we're going to do a game to better your divinations. Like I said, we're going to use that game with some statistics, some basic level statistics that you'll find will greatly help divinations get better and how to get better in practice. But any parting words for people starting out doing divinations or thinking about doing divinations right now? I'll let you guys say something, then I'll say something kind of controversial at the end.
Meditate and cleanse, peeps.
Wear your freaking mask or I'm going to find you.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh, okay. Well, that didn't really deal with divinations, but okay. What are you going to use divination to find them, Jason?
I just thought I was supposed to say something controversial. Sorry.
Jason is the divination if you don't wear a mask.
I think I just killed the moon. I'm just going to let Andrea lock this down.
Oh, I don't even know what to say after that. That was pretty much golden. I was going to basically say something profound about getting other readings from other people as just different perspectives that maybe not necessarily be accurate. But we kind of covered that too about some readers being dishonest, and when you get a reading that they could do curse work into reading. A talented practitioner could definitely spin it along. They could spin it along with just sleight of mind, like just tell a deep story to get you fearful. That's not true, but really, as we're going to cover, if you know something about the reading you're getting, you can match the feeling of the reading from what's being told to you and see if there's incongruities. But then at that point, you have probably enough experience to do your own reading, actually. But divination is basically a good way. Right now, if you're just starting out, you can't use divinations because of what Zach was talking about and Jason. You can, but you got to keep in mind it's literally a perspective on probabilities, which is a double uncertainty, as which you should take them with a grain of salt and try to look for other details in your life that back up the reading or disprove the reading. Clearly, it's all about the subjective self, about looking at things without committing to them, like a scientist, in a way. That's probably the best way to approach divinations, is like a scientist. Like, is there support for this or not? Scientific method is great to use with magic. It actually helps. And statistics help a lot with divinations. So as per usual, our sponsor is the Wu Zhen Clinic in Toronto, Acupuncture Supremus. By far the best acupuncture in Toronto. You can't get better than Zach. Just go there. We're open now. There you go. Secondly, if you're new to the show, the second hour of the show, we take about a 5-minute break. The second hour of the show is actually going to be for sponsors, and we're going to actually do real actual training. If you're not a sponsor, Zach, pitch it in the actual chat. You can become a sponsor, and we'll kind of let you go in. All of the recorded shows for all of the training that we do are on our Teachable. If you're sponsored, you can get access to every single last thing all the time. And we've done a lot of different workings and a lot of different classes, including the one that Jason was talking about, which was a Monkey King evocation. So you can go there. There's going to be a lot more ritual work in the second hours of the show that we're working out right now. So you'll see a lot more rituals be part of the second hour of the show too. So if you're a sponsor, go on and stay. For everyone else, let's take a 5-minute bio break. This is Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. Thank you for coming. Stay safe and healthy in the current environment. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.